meets mind, we ponder, we dream.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much for coming on the show. It's great to finally meet you because this is how we meet each other nowadays over Zoom. So why don't you tell us a little bit about yourself and your organization and what you're passionate about?
Sure. I'm Richard White. I'm founder CEO of Fathom.video. We are an AI meeting assistant.
And by the way, I use you every single interview. Every single interview. I think it's fantastic. Your product is fantastic.
Oh,
Sorry,
thank you.
didn't mean to jump in there.
No, that's good. That's the best kind of, it's a better intro than I was going to do. So, yeah. So,
Keep going,
yeah,
man. Keep going.
my background is originally in engineering product design. I've been doing startups now for, gosh, almost about 20 years. Before Fathom did this company called User Voice.
Sucker for punishment, huh?
And so I think my passion is a lot in kind of user experience, like I said, product design, and startups. I find this to be a pretty fun game to play. It's, I guess, why I keep signing up to do it. And things are going pretty well with Fathom right now. So it's always more fun to play the game when it's working and you're getting high scores.
Fantastic. So you've done startups for the last 20 years.
Yeah.
So what happens? Do you just like come up with an idea, or do you see a problem and then you say, "Hey, this needs to be solved"? Like, what's your process?
I think each startup has generally created the insight for the problem that I solved with the next startup, actually.
Really interesting.
Yeah. So I was actually working in this company, the first batch of Y Combinator. It was called Kiko. It was a Google Calendar before Google Calendar, to really date ourselves here. And the biggest problem I had as the lead designer was like, we had a bunch of users. I was trying to figure out how to get their feedback. And so I kind of, oh gosh, let's crowdsource their feedback, almost Reddit style crowdsource feedback solution. And that's what User Voice was, still is. And then at User Voice, I was actually working on a team where we were doing a bunch of Zoom calls to do product research on a new product we're building. And that's where I was like, gosh, this like taking notes and talking to people at the same time thing is really painful. And gosh, don't we have the technology to do this better? And we had some hypotheses around like cost of transcription, and we started Fathom in 2020. So transcription at that point was pretty expensive. We thought it was going to get a lot cheaper. And we also thought AI was going to get really good in the next couple of years. And we kind of thought, gosh, let's build a business assuming those two things become true, and we can give away a really powerful free AI note taker sort of thing.
So, and then that led to the next one. So you saw that. Yeah. So you're solving your own problem.
But yeah, right? In all these scenarios, that's what I've done.
Yeah. So can you tell me, like, in each of your startups, like, I don't know, pick whichever one you like. It's like, where did you have a moment where you realize, yes, this was definitely going to fly? I mean, was it early on? Was it farther on? Like, when did you have that turning point, and what was it?
In all of these, actually, I generally built something in the first couple of months that I could use myself to solve the problem. And I was like, oh, this does solve my problem. And maybe not as well as I want it to, but I can kind of see how it's changing my work life. For Fathom, that was, very early on, we built a version that was recording my calls and giving me kind of instant access to the transcript of the call. And I could highlight things on the meeting even before we had AI. And I could already tell, like, oh, this is like, I don't take notes anymore. Like, it's completely changed how I work. And I think that's super important because it gives you a lot of conviction, or at least it gave me a lot of conviction to weather the downturns or the kind of bumps along the road, to know that, oh no, I have high conviction in this because I use it myself and I've seen what it's done for me. So if it can do that for me, then I'm confident it can do it for other people.
Right. Well, it sounds like you've had one success after another. Have you had any failures to talk about, or are you just?
I think it's all in framing, right? Like the first company we did, we sold it. We sold it on eBay for $250,000. Is that a success? I don't know. By some metrics, yes.
Sounds like a success to me.
By now, right? Like, so, I think success is all relative. I've been very fortunate to, I mentioned that first company was in the first batch of Y Combinator. That got me into this like really great group of entrepreneurs. And I've been very fortunate to be the least successful person I know for a while. In my core friend group, there's a couple people who are, one's running a publicly traded company. A couple of them sold their company for like $1 billion, like just insane amount of success in my core friend group. So it's, what do they call it? Comparison is the thief of joy sort of thing. Yeah. So by that metric, none of these have been a success yet, but by like the lofty standards of the circles I'm fortunate to run in. But yeah, I think by most standards, all of these have been some modicum of success, and have been honestly great learning opportunities for me too. I feel like I get smarter with every go, go around, if you will.
Yeah, but it sounds like each one of them actually was able to turn a profit, make some money, and then you
Yeah.
could sell it afterwards. It's not one of those ones where we threw a product out there and then hardly anyone bought it, or we couldn't monetize it and then it just failed that way. It's like you were always able to find some
Yeah.
niche that
I think it
somebody
was,
needed something in. Yeah.
I think in all these cases, the first thing I did was solve my own problem. And the second thing I did, or maybe in parallel, was like make sure other people had this problem.
Right.
I think my buddy Justin has this comment: first time founders think about product, second time founders think about distribution.
Mm.
And so I think with each go around, I think that's what I think trying to get better at is like, how do I get to an MVP faster, but also how do I get to some visibility of like true market size and TAM and opportunity here faster?
Yeah.
I think Fathom has a larger TAM than User Voice did, which had a larger TAM than the previous one. So I think you kind of get better, but I think that's, I think to your point, it's like, uh, I'm not just like building it for myself and then just going heads down and being like, oh, great,
Right.
we're done here, sort of thing.
Well, I mean, you can't do that. I mean, especially nowadays, it's almost like, I mean, I think we've surpassed the product, right? It used to be you put out something great, it'll go viral, and then all of a sudden, you're a success. And now it's like, I'm going to spend more time on the distribution, on the marketing, on getting the word out about this,
Right.
than the actual product itself. I mean, that's flipped, right?
Yeah. I mean, there's this period 10 years ago where people were like selling vaporware and they're like, oh yeah, I have such good ideas for this product. And there's so few products in the market. If you're doing software, it's like, yeah, general guidance was like this lean startup stuff where it's like, yeah, just start charging people 10K for a thing you're kind of building. I'm like, that doesn't work anymore. Right. No. Like market is awash in products. And I'm actually a big fan of like launch late, like iterate, incubate privately for a long time. Because when you launch, you only get one chance to make a good first impression now, and you better make a really good first impression in this market because you've got 3 competitors coming out next week, right?
Yeah.
Sort of thing. So
when you say launch late, do you mean you do a lot of testing internally before it goes out, or when you say launch late after other competitors?
That's fair. I mean, kind of like announce, like publicly market late is probably what I mean.
Okay.
Like the announce of like, oh, we built this thing, we're putting it on social, we're doing the product hunt thing, we're doing all that stuff. I think you want to do that late now.
Right.
You want to build something quickly and, get folks in it and use it yourself, and all that stuff's still true. But I think you actually want to do it in private. Like I want to carefully control who gets to see the first look at my product.
Right.
And there's probably 500,000 people I'm happy seeing the sausage getting made and kind of the messy beginning. But for the most of the market, I want them to see when we've like, oh, wow, I just saw this Fathom thing and it's amazing. Right. And I think for Fathom, a year in, we had 50 active users. And that was somewhat intentional. And like, we burned through 600 beta users to get to those 50. And then we got this group of 50 people that used it day in, day out. And then we're like, okay, great. We can now exit beta because we think we've got a really good product. But we didn't even try to worry about launching or getting a bunch of usage until I had a cohort of like 1,500 people that just used it regularly as much as I did.
But you were able to raise enough money to get to that point, right?
Correct.
You didn't have to scramble to bring cash in the door to do that. And now I don't know how you do it, like having it completely free for the levels that you got. Obviously you charge for a premium. There's a premium service for better
premium
transcription
version, and really there's like a team version. And so we always knew, but like we don't want to charge individuals. We want to basically charge the manager when the manager wants to consolidate all that usage under one roof, right? And so we're happy to take notes for free because eventually a manager is going to come along and pay us to say, hey, I want to know what's happening on all my customer calls or all these Teams meetings.
Right.
Cool. I'll pay you $30 a person for that sort of thing. But yeah, so I think free, like a really powerful free version, I think is a really powerful marketing. It is our marketing, right? Like our marketing is all word of mouth because, like you gave this great testimonial at the beginning of the call, right? Like you gave this podcast, and that's how most of our marketing happens. That's how people find out about Fathom. So I think that's another hack in this day and age is like give away something for free that's really good. Not, so a lot of people give away something for free. It's like, oh, you get it for free for 2 weeks, or you get it for free in perpetuity, but it's like really, cut off at the knees.
Really dumbed down. Yeah.
Really dumbed down.
Exactly.
And, so I think, I think word of mouth has never been more powerful with social media and all that sort of stuff. So if you can give something away for free and find a way to monetize in some other angle later on, I think it's a really powerful model.
Fantastic. So you said you weren't not a big fan of building in public because there's a lot of people who are doing that now. It's like, what do you say the downsides are to building in public?
Yeah, I think if you're doing the extreme version where you're true, like where you're doing the like open kimono, I'm telling you everything good, bad, and
Yeah,
ugly.
yeah, yeah. Because
Well,
I've seen so much of that out on Twitter or X. People are like, "Oh, yeah, I'm building this in public." I mean, like every day you get, "Okay, here's what I'm doing today. Here's what I'm doing today," and I'm like, "Do you really need to do that? Do we really
yeah,
want?"
yeah. If your audience is like other builders and founders, I think that can be kind of interesting. But to your
Mm,
point, it's like once everyone's doing a thing, like the utility of it goes down, sort of thing. Like
right.
that was novel 5, 10 years ago when it was like everyone was, default closed, and the first people who kind of did it, it's pretty good. But I also think it's like it's only interesting at a certain level of scale. Like I don't,
Mm,
if you have no followers and you just got like we got 10 active users today, like it's kind of boring, right? Kind of
yeah.
my one of my good friends, Justin Kahn, who founded Justin TV, which turned into Twitch. I remember the early days of Justin TV where he was live streaming his life.
Oh,
And
I
I was,
remember that. I remember
yeah.
that.
And I was kind of I was remarking because I was actually just at Emmett's wedding this past week. I was actually officiating it, who was his co-founder.
Oh
And
wow.
we're kind of reminiscing about this era and kind of thinking about like now our lives are actually pretty interesting, right? People have exits, and so they've got a little money in the bank, and so their lives are actually pretty interesting. It was 5 people in a 2-bedroom working 20 hours a day. It's actually not really interesting content, right? Like,
Yeah.
and I
Yeah.
kind of think the same thing about like your super early stage startup where you've got 10 active users and 8 of them are your family members. Like, I don't know, not the most interesting content. So you kind of have to get some modicum of success before that's interesting. But no, I think there's so many different ways to play this game. That's what's fun about it. But I'm just a big fan of like, I think you want to create scarcity in the market and you want to like, again, go focus. I don't want the pressure of being in public to a certain degree.
Mm,
I think some people need that. I don't need that. I need the pressure of like, I'm freaked out that, we're burning money every day and we only have 10 active users, right? Like
yeah.
that's all the motivation I need sort of thing to
Yeah. You
keep
don't need
making the
anything
product better every
else.
day, right? Like I don't need everyone in the world watching me do it sort of thing. But
Plus, a lot of this is entrepreneur theater, right? I mean, so much of it is just entrepreneur theater, right? They just want to say, "Hey, this is what I'm doing," and it's not going. It doesn't go anywhere, and it doesn't really mean anything.
yeah, there's a lot of like one of my favorite concepts is like the cargo culting concept. I don't know
Mm,
if this like if you're not sure what it is, like look it up. It's like this amazing thing that happened after World War II. There's a lot of cargo culting in startup culture, right? Where it's like, oh, I'm doing all the things I see other founders do based on what I can read on social media. But what you read on social media is not often what they're actually doing. Or, like the best
yeah.
entrepreneurs I know never launch in public, wouldn't tell anyone what they're doing. Like, and the stuff they put on social is like 10% of it, but 90% of it is way less sexy and not really an interesting read. And so
Exactly.
you'll get really weird. You're imitating the wrong things in a lot of cases.
Yeah.
A lot of it's just unsexy.
Yeah. Well, it's like the stuff where they say, "Oh, so and so billionaire does this every day, and so billionaire does that every day, and so billionaire does this every day." And I'm like, did they do that before they became a billionaire,
Right.
or they do it now because
Right.
they have the time?
Right. 100%. 100%.
So you got to look at when they did that. So
Yeah.
that's the key thing.
My favorite quote is it's easier for the world to believe a simple lie than a complex truth. And
Right.
startup land is full of complex truths, right? Like
Mm-hmm.
it's all nuance, right? About how you do it. And again, there's no one way to build, to market all these things. But you wouldn't think that if you went out into the media space, right? You're like, there's the one true way to do it. All I do know is anytime I hear there's one true way to do it, whether it's an engineer or a marketer or whatnot, I know that's not someone I want to work with.
Yeah.
Yeah,
well, so many factors had to come into play. You're at the right place at the right time for the right market, right product. All those things had to come into play for it to happen. And you could just go back and you can repeat somebody else's playbook word for word
Mhm.
and not get anywhere because it's a completely different time. It's a completely different market. Everything has its time and place, right?
Yep. Yeah, I think I'll tell you the biggest difference between that I see in startup founders is the ones that are hypothesis driven and the ones that are not.
Mm,
Like so, for example, for Fathom, we had this hypothesis like transcription is going to become free and AI is going to become really good. And if we wait till those two things are true, it'll be too late. And so we need to start now to build out infrastructure and distribution and build out the user experience. And then when those things become true, hopefully we'll hit this window where as our users driving going up, the costs are coming down and we can afford
right.
to do all this sort of like, and we could have very much got the windows of time wrong, right? Probably, and there's probably 10 parallel universes to this where it doesn't work, but this one, it worked. But there's a lot of other founders who don't have that. And I didn't
Yep.
used to have that. I used to have just,
Yep.
I build a thing and then every day I'm like, oh, maybe we do this, maybe we do that. Right. Like, and I saw this in YC too. Like we went through our YC batch, probably about 50% of them like, we're doing this because this is where the world is going. And here's a hypothesis about where this fits in. And the other half are like, I don't know, I needed this thing and my friend needed it. And again, both of these can work, but I think you end up doing better work when you're like, I have some hypotheses that I'm constantly testing or building my business around. And I'm okay if the business fails if I got one of those hypotheses wrong.
Yeah. Because most of the time, the
someone.
hypothesis built ones are actually looking for some type of future that they're expecting is going to happen.
Right.
Whereas the other ones are like, oh, this is a problem I have today. And you hope you build it and get it out there soon enough so that it can address the problem and actually be monetized at the same time.
Yeah.
So did you move from one type to another? I mean, how did you become so prescient to realize that these two things were going to happen?
I think part of it's like the company you keep. And, I think that on the AI side, like I kind of knew from talking to my friends that they were very bullish. That like, no, this AI stuff's going to get there. Right. And I remember we put AI in our name in 2021 and I had a bunch of investors freak out on me. Be like, no one likes AI. I'm like, no, they don't like this version of AI because it's not really AI. Like if you remember 2016, 2017, people started adding AI to all these things, which on the back end were if then statements in the code, right? They weren't real AI. Right. So that was one. I think the other one was on transcription. It was like, we just used I think early 2020, we tested out 5 or 6 different transcription platforms. And my takeaway was like, all of these are pretty good. Like they're all, and so there's really no differentiation. So this is probably a commodity and therefore it's probably, we can price compete them against each other and it's probably then going to zero. And so that, that was kind of our hypothesis. Like at the time it was a big bet because at the time it was like $3 an hour for machine transcription.
Yeah. It was not cheap. I remember going through that going, how can you possibly make it cheap? And then was the coupling with Zoom, is that the thing that really drove your usage? Or
that's the thing we got lucky on because we always had this thesis that like there's a word of mouth product in here if you can make it free. I think for virality to work, you really need to be free and not even freemium. Because pricing pages create cognitive dissonance and make you think. So we always had this thesis like, okay, at scale, there's this really powerful word of mouth behavior. But the challenge with all those kind of referral loop programs, like how do you get the first 10,000 people? And literally a month into starting the company, Zoom announced they're building a new marketplace. And that was this like, oh yes, but also oh shit kind of moment where like they announced this marketplace. We're like, that's exactly what we need. That would be amazing for us. It'd also be really bad for us if we weren't in this. Right. And they announced it and they announced 30 partners and they announced it was coming out in 2 months. And I was like,
you're like, oh crap.
Right. And so then I, begged, borrowed, and stole my way into, trying to get intros into the right people at Zoom. And eventually just someone told me, hey, this person running this program. And I cold emailed him. It's like, I think it would be a great fit for your program. And at this point, I've got like not a lot to show. I think we just got into YC. So I could kind of say like, we're new YC companies, which carried some cachet. And so thankfully for us, the guy who runs the program, Ross, was awesome, right? I don't think you could email many folks running at a company like Zoom, especially during the pandemic when they were just crushing it. And, they've got these logos of all these great big companies and I'm some startup with no brand. He's like, yeah, come on in. I don't know what I did karmically to deserve that, but I'm really appreciative to Ross and team that did that. And then we got lucky because that project ended up getting delayed 6 months, which worked really well because we could not have met that initial launch date. So again, timing is everything to a certain degree.
Were there any other transcription services in the initial batch, in the initial marketplace?
I think there was one.
And they're gone, right? Nobody uses them anymore.
I don't use them, so it's no, I think they probably exist, but they're very few. And so we got very fortunate with that. And then we put AI in our name also because we knew the marketplace was going to be alphabetically sorted. And so we were like, oh, we're AI Notetaker by Fathom. So that also helped. But yeah, so it's a, hypothesis driven startup that you look for every little edge you can along the way though, right? You look for every hack and every edge you can get.
Right. And now you've expanded to other platforms too, right? You're not just,
now we're Google Meet and Microsoft Teams. We do, I think, the big 3 of meeting platforms. And
it's like 80% of the market, right? Pretty much.
Probably about 96 of this percent. 96%.
Really?
Yeah.
You don't really need anybody else for that. Wow.
Yeah, we're adding to other platforms. I mean, At our end of the market, it's about 96%. As you go up market, you tend to find, if you went to enterprise, you probably find a little
Yeah.
bit more of a diaspora sort of thing.
So are you concerned at all that Zoom and these other tools might actually bring in their own transcriptions because they're heavy on AI themselves? Like that they'll displace you? Because that's the big problem with being in a marketplace, right?
Yeah, 100%. The good news is, I mean, they've actually had a competing product with us for about 2 years now. And yeah, I think it's funny. I think we always kind of assumed they would. Like that seems a natural thing. Like I think I see all these founders get upset when it's like, oh, we got on this marketplace and we built this thing that feels kind of table stakesy, and then the platform built it into the platform. It's like, how did you not see that coming, right? Like,
Yeah.
The good news for us,
it's obvious, really, if you think about it.
You can't expect it. Like, people will do right by you, by the personal relationship for some period of time, but it can't fight the inevitability of things that just make logical sense.
Yeah.
The good news for us is that most people are actually multi-platform. Most people aren't just on Zoom. Even people like myself who are mostly on Zoom are often on Google Meet, sometimes on Microsoft Teams. And so I think a lot of folks are looking for a platform that is on everything, can kind of be like, hey, you can use, no matter what link you get sent in that calendar invite, your solution is going to work. And I think that's super important to folks. And that's where we really thrive.
Yeah. No, I love it. I love it. So it's time to think like a future. This is the year 2034, 10 years from now. Where do you think we're going to be in 10 years? Where do you think you're going to be in 10 years? Where do you think the company's going to be in 10 years?
I think this is the hardest time to ever answer that question in the history of startups. Maybe. I don't know.
Tell me about it.
Like, we made this bet on that AI was going to get really good. It got really good way faster than I would have bet, which has been great for us. But honestly, it's a little scary because, I think, I've always rested on, well, I know how to build software. There's always going to be some future in that. I'm not so sure there's going to be a future in building software in 10 years, right? Like
exactly.
I'll tell you where I think we're going to be a couple of years, kind of specific to our space.
Okay.
There are two things that are really painful about meetings, right? One is, I think we actually like meeting with other folks, but what's really painful is like meetings create all this work. I do this meeting and then afterwards I got to document what happened, and I got to, put my tasks over here, and I got to check off these things, and I got to write this spec. And I think we're very rapidly getting this place where that's not going to happen. Like, you have the meeting and you will speak things into existence because the AI is there. And it's like, not just transcribing, not just writing the summary, but it's actually logging the task in the right task manager that you use. It's checking off the ones you said you got done. It's already writing the spec, writing the skeleton of the spec that you said you're going to do, writing the follow-up email. So I think there's this world where like you can just meet and talk to folks, and the AI is like, it really is like your personal assistant doing everything. That's one thing we're working on that I think is going to be really good. The other thing is I also think there's this other world where like when you're in an organization, dissemination of information is really clunky, and like meetings and Slack tend to be the primary way to do it. But meetings are really an inefficient way to do it. And I think we're in this world where, it's actually one of the big things we're working on is how do we give you the kind of like a 5-minute highlight reel every day of the content that's happening in the meetings that you're not in that you should be aware of. Your sales manager, it might be objections happening in sales calls. If you're engineering manager, it might be heated debates between your engineering team, right? Like, so I think you're going to end up in this world where like you can basically audit all the important moments, right? Without having to sit through all the stuff that's not, I think we all know what are like, what percentage of the average meeting we sit in that we're like, oh yeah, that part was super useful. Right. And I think we all know it's probably less than 20%. And so I think there's a world where we're going to be able to free people up from having, putting the right people in the meeting and no one else. And then, if we talk about Tim and Tim needs to know something, great. The AI is just going to make sure Tim hears about this debate we had about architecture, sort of thing. So
what do you think about digital twins meeting and stuff like that? It's like, oh, I don't need to be at that meeting, but my avatar can be there. My avatar can be at all these 5 meetings, and then it'll refer. Like, do you think that model will go anywhere?
I thought for a while that you'll have this like creep towards like, okay, first I'm going to use something like Facetune to like make me look better in the meeting.
Yeah.
Which will then make it easier for an AI to approximate me. I think from a social perspective, that's going to be hard because I think people don't like feeling like they're being fooled.
Right.
I do think that like one of my more fun things is like, I imagine a future where salespeople never went away. There's sales are still happening, but like some percentage of them are just AIs talking to other AIs.
Right.
And so like,
exactly.
instead of having some, like, we never have this like actual API to API connection. It's just bots talking to other bots, and no one can tell which one's a bot, which one's a human. So we keep this performative thing going. We can never tell what 10% is actually the human that showed up.
Right.
Yeah. And so like Zoom is running on 90% bots or something like that. Like I could see that being like a 5 to 10 years out sort of thing.
Well, it's absolutely going to happen because we're going to have our, like, organizations will have their bots and people will have their bots. And I'm just going to send my bot to go out and, book my travel. And then it can go out and talk to a bunch of bots, and you're going to orchestrate it, but everything is going to be done by a bunch of bots. So meetings will devolve to that point too, where I'll just say, okay, I need to be in these 5 meetings. I can be at a lot more meetings, but I won't personally be in the meetings, but my avatar will be there taking notes for me and maybe putting in some decisions that I would normally have done based on.
I think for things that are, I think for meetings where the content is kind of scripted, like a sales call, or your involvement's mostly read only, like internal meeting where like I mostly am here to consume the content, I think that works great.
Yeah.
When it's like, oh, I'm actually truly collaborating, then that's not going to work so good, right? But which I think is good, which I actually think means we will have less like, I don't think we'll end up this place where we have a whole bunch of bots that are just listening. I think we'll end up this place where the meeting itself has got this built-in bot that's like disseminating out to all the people that need to know about it. And the only people in the meeting are the people that actually need to be actively collaborating. And so the meeting becomes more fun, becomes smaller, I think it'll be a mix. But again, it's just gonna be crazy the next couple of years because the capabilities, what you can do with AI, it's crazier than Moore's law in some ways, right? It's like capabilities.
So you think like 3-4 years, it'll all be completely no code, and you just ask AI to build something for you, and it'll build it. Are we going to get to that point?
Probably. It seems like it seems hard to imagine you wouldn't. I mean, it depends on what I think there's an interesting question. I think there's a lot of stuff where that's true. There's probably a handful of things where it's like scaling circuit architectures and stuff where it's like there's not a ton of code. Like if you're like trying to just build some CRUD interface, like I need a UI that does this. It's a lot of code on the internet you can learn about. The AI can learn from that to make that like that. And it's kind of crazy because for the last 10 years, every SaaS product is basically that, right? Like it's just like, oh, we just took some workflow and we just made.
Yeah, everybody builds everything on everybody else's.
Yeah, it's just kind of some CRUD workflow. I still think you'll have the engineering stuff will move to the higher level. Like it'll basically, like everything, move to the higher order function, right? Where it's like, oh, okay, the design of this architecture might be something that we don't yet trust the AI for. We just have it do front end work for the most part, right?
Right.
Cool. But that, I actually think, I think what it'll do, software is important, but I actually think what it'll do, the operational side of the businesses is going to be the bigger impact. Like I think AI does the operational side of the business what open source did to the product development side.
Right.
Because we're already at the place where you can build WhatsApp with 10 engineers. You can build big technical platforms with very few engineers. What we haven't been able to do before is have $100 million revenue business with 5 salespeople.
Yeah.
Right.
Yeah.
We had to have 150 before. And so I think, customer support, sales, you name it, there's a lot of opportunities there where I think AI will revolutionize things, not just on software dev.
Yeah. We'll still be around. We'll still be around for at least another 10 years, I think.
Maybe. Oh, yeah. This
has been great. And like I said, I love Fathom. It's a fantastic tool. I use it all the time whenever I do an interview. In fact, even outside of interviews. So it's great. So if someone wants to get in touch with you, what's the best way?
Yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn. I'm Richard White. I have like a weird kind of blue, Fathom blue. It looks like, bitmap avatar. It's not an NFT. For everyone asks me that. It's just like every bitmap image is an NFT now, but it's not. It's just like a cool little AI avatar we made. But yeah, you can find me on LinkedIn and message me there.
Awesome. Well, thank you so much. It's been great.
Thank you for having me.
Talk to you soon. Thanks. Bye.
Pixels and philosophies merge and mold, a future untold, unseen.